I quite often get an agent either asking me why we don't buy properties on the MLS or did you see this property on the multiple listing service? And I'm going to tell you why we don't buy properties on the MLS, why we don't look at them, and kind of what you can gain from this information on your own investing decision making in general. So, the analogy that I've always given, and if you've ever come to one of my events, you might have heard this analogy in the past, but I look at the multiple listing service versus off market deals, kind of like fishing in two different ponds. And pond number one, the MLS or the multiple listing service, is a pond where you've got 100 fishermen all trying to catch one or two fish. So, pond number one, there's 100 people around a really crowded pond. There's two fish in there. They're all trying to catch the same couple of fish. And in general, when there are so many people after just one or two fish, it there's going to be a lot of people who don't get anything. That's what I would kind of define as the MLS, pond number one. Pond number two is a pond where there's, instead of 100 fishermen, there's 100 fish and there's two people fishing. Now, obviously, with that analogy, you can kind of see if you're needing to eat today, if you're needing to eat a fish today, what pond you might want to fish in. Like, do you want to fish in a pond where there's 100 people trying to catch two fish? Or do you want to fish in a pond where there's 100 fish and there's two people trying to catch them? That is the difference between the multiple listing service and getting deals off market. Because a lot of times when I tell people that you can't get deals on the MLS or we don't buy deals on the MLS, I will oftentimes get the argument that they've bought a deal on the MLS and it was a good deal. Or maybe they know somebody who bought a deal on the MLS and they made money. So by giving this pond analogy of pond number one, where there's 100 fishermen trying to catch two fish, it illustrates the point that buying properties on the MLS, it is not that you can't ever get a good deal on the multiple listing service, right? I would never speak in terms of anything being 100%. But when I look at running a legitimate business, where am I going to try to fish? Am I going to try to fish in the pond where it's really easy for me to catch fish? Or am I going to fish in the pond where it's really hard for me to catch fish? Now, when I have this conversation with people, a lot of times when they, ask me individually, it takes a while for kind of that to set in. But I can assure you that the odds of you getting a great deal on the multiple listing service are far less than if you were to get it off market. Okay. What is the reason for that? Again, with the analogy of pond number one and pond number two, it's just simply the difference in the competition. So as simple as this is, right? What is the main purpose of the multiple listing service? I'm sure there are people smarter than me that could probably go into more detail than this. But when I look at putting a property into the MLS, the multiple listing service, I put a property into the MLS. What I expect out of the MLS, what I think the main function of the MLS is to do, is to make sure that as many people as possible know that that property is for sale. And the multiple listing service does a really good job of that. Because not only when you put a property on the multiple listing service, does every single person who's registered in the MLS get a notification potentially, but it also syndicates out to all of the websites that are online. So by entering some information into the MLS, some property information into the MLS, and by clicking a post button, that property gets syndicated, that property gets pushed pretty much everywhere. So anyone and everyone who is looking for a property anywhere near that is going to see it. And that's where we get the analogy of the 100 people fishing. In reality, when we look on the multiple listing service, in many cases, it's far more than 100 matches that it's going to. So again, what does that mean? That simply means that, again, when we're looking at it from the perspective of trying to get a great deal, it is very, very challenging to get a really good deal if the property's on the multiple listing service. So when an agent or anybody reaches out to me and they say, hey, um, what, look at this property. You have to understand that that agent is not the only one sending somebody that listing. So how many eyeballs get on those properties? It's hard to say. But even if you just kind of look at a property that you've listed in the MLS, and then if you just go like to a Zillow.com and you look up how many times that property was saved. I think we listed a home over the weekend and got 200 saves. So what does a save mean to me in Zillow? It means somebody that probably is thinking about attending an open house, right? So if we have 200 people that save a property, that probably means that 200 people are somewhat interested in that property. Okay, again, that's pawn number one. Pawn number two is off market. But there's a lot of different ways that you can obtain off market deals. Could be a listing appointment that you went on. It could be another agent in your office that has a coming soon. It could be a mailer that you sent. It could be a call that you made. It could be a door that you knocked on. It could be, a ton of different ways to get these opportunities. But in general, and let's make this as simple as sending a mailer. If I send a mailer to somebody and I go on an appointment where they have seen my mailer, called my office, and we've gone out to that property, typically we're not the only ones that are actually going to see that house. They might call just me, but a lot of times they're going to call me and maybe one or two other people. Now compare the odds of me buying that property, right? Where one or two or three people have seen it as compared to a multiple listing service that might have 200 saves. Again, you can see where in real life, the analogy of pond number one, where 100 people are fishing for 2 fish, and pond number two, where 2 people are fishing for 100 fish, really comes into play. Okay. Now, as I say this, I'm sure that most people that are listening can understand this, from a certain level, right? But there's more components to this, because at the end of the day, my company buys 100 plus properties per year. We're actually looking to do more. So we are very aggressive and active and out there trying to get as many deals as possible. So another point that I would just like to make in general is that if you could get really good deals on the multiple listing service, I would be doing it. Okay. That's what I do, right? So we're very good at buying and fixing and flipping properties. So if it was something that worked, we would also be doing it.